Hi everyone, it's Jess and we're going to be talking about graphic novels today. So historically, graphic novels were considered a controversial medium. Currently, they're being used to implement in school curriculum. But nevertheless, graphic novels are affected by modern day technology, media, and information. Where before you got that typical phrase of it's not a book, go get a book, and that they didn't have a home in the school, we really do see a change in the way our society is using graphic novels. So let's jump into what a graphic novel is. So it's written and illustrated in a style that's similar to a comic book. It's called sequential art, a series of illustrations which, when viewed in order, tells a story. And it's juxtaposed pictorial and other images in a deliberate sequence intended to convey information. And they're trying to get the viewer or the reader to respond and have a connection with the story based on these images. So here in the story is Benny and Penny, and you can see from the story that the story goes from top to bottom, and then you have the footprints going out into the negative space, leading the reader to come to the next page. And then you have a series of panels of 3, and then a long panel down, and then you move to the right, and then down again. And this is where it gets interesting, where the kids know how to navigate, or can navigate pretty readily, how to read these passages, because they understand that it follows a path, and they have to figure out or decode what path is the author trying to send them through, and understand what's happening in between each of the negative panel spaces. And so we're going to look at it more specifically in a second. Some great literature to read would be Multiliteracies in Motion, which multiliteracies is a new term that's coming out talking about multimodalities, but really looking in on that when we're teaching students, we need to be paying attention to the linguistic pieces, the audio, spatial, gestural, and the visual, and how all these pieces together is what forms real true understanding of what an individual is reading. Now, graphic novels are great because you get the linguistic of the text bubbles, so you know what the characters are saying. You get the visual because you have the pictures telling the story. You have the gestural because the pictures and the characters are going to be moving, and the authors and the illustrators will do certain techniques to indicate these gestures or facial expressions, so that way the student understands without words what that character is feeling, and then themselves they understand how they feel in response to that character. Spatial because you're conveying a space of time, or you can understand where it's taking place geographically. Is it in a house? Is it outside? Is it in Rome? Is it in New York? You understand that piece based on the setting that the characters are placed inside. The only one that's a little bit harder for graphic novels to encompass is the audio design. You do have your action words like wham, pow, slam that's going to pull in the effects that the student might put in their own brain. But another way to do this is reading it out loud, so that the way the students get that audio piece, or mixing that music that's going to combine to give the true feeling of the essence of what the story is trying to convey. Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art is a great book by Scott McCloud, where he actually goes through and describes and talks about how graphic novels and comics aren't just something to hide underneath your bed when you're reading before you go to bed, but talking about how they are a true art form and how they are true pieces of literature. And in this panel, he goes through and he discusses in panel 1 the differences between how you move through a comic book. And in the first one, you see in number 1, moment to moment. So you see the girl's eyes open, then she closes them, moment to moment. Or you see the spider inch closer to the person's gaping open mouth. Number 2 is action to action. So you see the ball coming close, and then already wham, he's slammed. He's hit it out of the park. Or the person driving fast up and they crash into the tree. So you have one action mirrored with what automatically happens right next to it. So a cause and effect type thing. Subject to subject. So not necessarily are they happening right next to each other, but this is going from one moment to the next moment, and they might not be in the same area. Scene to scene, so you're not really even in the same area. For example, in the middle panel, you see Bombay, Paris, New York. They might have a similar subject that they're trying to convey where you see the fruit in that, but they're not happening anywhere near each other in the scene to scene. In number 5, aspect to aspect, you have similar panelings where they have the same subject that they're trying to do, but they're different aspects of place, idea, or mood. So you see the Christmas tree to the Santa Claus, or the bright sun, sunglasses, and then the birds in the sky. So they all fall underneath the same subject, but they're not really happening at the same moment. And then the last one, number 6, is non sequitur. They have really no relationship really at all. So you see the person saying cheese, the tree, and then the fishes. There's really no rhyme or reason why they're there, but for some reason they're going to help tell a part of the story. There are 8 genres of graphic novels that we're going to look at: superheroes, action and adventure, science fiction, fantasy, mysteries, contemporary life, humor, nonfiction. And you might have noticed in here too, you would have seen some titles that look very similar for being classic chapter books. And that is a huge new trend that's happening where a lot of our classic chapter books are being turned into graphic novels to try to engage our younger readers and our readers that aren't necessarily wanting to read books. They'd rather watch TV or play video games. Chester Comics is a great comic book series that is good and found in Virginia and a lot of our tourist locations, where they're going to be panels that are going to talk about an instance that's happening in history, have the timeline in the top, have a main piece that's talking about it, but right in the first panel you see already that you have an aspect to aspect panel going on here where it's not going to be action to action or moment to moment. The next one is looking at how they also will pair an event in history but try to make it trendy by they matched it with Star Trek in order to explain to the kids the rights in the Constitution. When pictures and words are used together to communicate, the results can be much greater than either of one alone could produce. The idea that 2 brains are better than one comes to mind when I read this quote, because it makes me think that pictures alone students can infer and try to figure out what's going on. Words alone, the students are taking those words and trying to figure out, well, what would this look like? But when you put the two together, you're actually getting a lot more information, and the students are able to almost play a movie verbatim in their head. So you do picture books by themselves, wonderful mode of learning. Chapter books by themselves, wonderful mode of learning. But graphic novels are kind of the piece that's going to fall in the middle, and it's another mode to value and teach students how to manipulate and use because it's marrying these 2 great forms in one. Let's talk a little bit about the history of graphic novels. So in the past, the first graphic novel was actually when you're looking at cave paintings, hieroglyphics, stone carvings, tapestries, meaning that took place in the form of pictures. The first actual published graphic novel came in 1841 in the United States. And here's just a picture of what this looked like, this graphic novel. And in this story, Old Buck is the story about a man who meets his lady love and all of the misadventures he experiences in the process of getting her to marry him. Today, so in the 21st century, graphic novels have a greater appeal as the format spans a multitude of genres and is more readily accessible to the masses. We see a huge increase in the production of graphic novels, where I said the classics are turning into graphic novels are turning into movies. We see them coming into the classroom and the public library. This isn't a mode of learning that's going away. It's coming in and it's trying to fight for its place in our literacy spectrum. So, in the classroom, today's students have had a childhood filled with rapid pace and visual stimulation of television and video games. and they therefore are seeking the same characteristics in their reading materials. So when they're reading those graphic novels, they understand the path to take because they understand the path in their video game to take to go to the coins, to get to the pipe, to find the bad guy in the end, to save the princess. They understand that it has to take a path to move through, and so when they look at the graphic novel, they understand, like McCloud was showing you in those panel sections, how to infer and decipher what's happening between each panel. Was there time that happened in between it, and what happened during that whole time frame? They're figuring that piece out, and that's a huge piece of inferencing that they're doing because it's also helping them drive the story together. If they didn't know how to do that, the story would crumble apart. So to read and interpret graphic novels, students have to pay attention to the usual literary elements of character, plot, and dialogue, and they also have to consider visual elements such as color, shading, panel layout, perspective, and even the lettering style, which is really pulling them into paying attention to author's purpose. Graphic novels are a great tool for them to talk about figurative language, or how am I supposed to read this based on how the author wrote it? Why are the letter styles this way? Why does this POW look bigger than this crash? How does that affect the way that it should sound? So the students are really paying attention to a magnitude of pieces and deciphering the author's purpose and meaning. So some reasons to teach it is that it's great to promote the goals of traditional literature. It requires students to consider visual elements of text and help them develop visual literacy. And they offer teachers the opportunity to implement critical media literacy in the classroom. Graphic novels, sorry. They're really good because they help struggling readers. They want to read them because they're engaging and interesting and visually stimulating. Students with special needs. When I think about our children with autism, right now Haley's been using these a lot with her kids because they can show what the character is feeling. They can see the expression on their face. They can understand panel by panel what's happening, and it's keeping them engaged and linked in, and they like to read the text bubbles and help navigate through. It's also a way that they teach the students through social stories. And English language learners, it's great for them because they can go through and understand what's happening by the tone of voice that they see that the characters are portraying of what does that mean. And when they get stuck with multiple word meanings, a graphic novel can help them cut away those layers. And so these students are getting benefits because they're learning how to foster critical reading skills. Their vocabulary in the graphic novels is actually more advanced than traditional novels in the action words that are being introduced, the language that's being introduced. They help them to develop critical skills necessary to read more challenging works, including the classics, and requiring students to be actively engaged in decoding and comprehending a range of literacy devices. Here's some examples of what you would find generally when you're reading a typical graphic novel. No. In media today, we see that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a lot of our video games, films, television, the internet, they're all using graphic novels and adapting them into because of their popularity. In technological advanced world, it's difficult to engage readers without using these forms of media. So I'm going to pause here. Do you know any movies that you may or may not have seen or saw that was out now or a while ago that were graphic novels originally? On the Road to Perdition, Sin City, V for Vendetta, Ghost World, Watchmen, A History of Violence, 300 were all graphic novels first before turned into movies. Maus, Art Spiegelman, he wrote a book, Maus, about the Holocaust for his father. And he wrote the book where the characters of mice were the Jews and the cats were the Nazis. And it's a very heart-wrenching, wonderfully written and illustrated book that depicts what the Holocaust was like. And it was the first comic book to win a Pulitzer Prize. And it's also a great book that changed the way comics are viewed in America, and it proved that they could be serious art. So we're looking at how graphic novels, they're increasing in popularity because access to graphic novels is increasing. They're available in public libraries and school libraries. There's digital versions on e-readers, and there is something for everyone. There are the classics that are being changed into graphic novels. Children's books are being turned into graphic novels. The tune books that we have in our reading lab are beginner graphic novels. So they're looking at trying to accommodate a multitude of interests and genres. Here's just some statistics from 2001 to 2010 of how this industry is growing. So, impact graphic novels, they stimulate critical thinking, develop critical literacy, they're increasing readers' literacy with the different genres to choose from, providing alternate views of history, they're improving reading skills, they result in stronger comprehension, and they engage visual learners. They are influencing because our younger audience, they're gravitating to these books because they understand them, they're engaging, they're stimulating, where we ourselves were not as stimulating as we know that sometimes these graphic novels are. They are huge in that some students learn visually, and these graphic novels are teaching them visually. They are being adapted into school systems. The gaming industry and graphic novels just mirror each other for their world that these students live in. Hollywood and the film industry are creating movies out of these books. And so, therefore, our society's views towards them are changing. So, graphic novels for adults. So, if you're kind of interested in looking into this a little more for your own leisure time, Romeo and Juliet is a graphic novel now. The graphic canon is taking all the canon books. There's 3 volumes of all the canon works that you would have read in high school, middle school, or college, and they created them into a canon for graphic novels. The Midsummer's Night Dream, Pride and Prejudice, Dracula, Jane Eyre, Persepolis, which is a great book about a girl in the Middle East who and her life and growing up there and then moving away. There's actually a sequel to it. It's a great moving work. The Odyssey by Homer, and again Mouse. So thank you. I hope this gave you more questions about graphic novels where you want to go and look them and see what they're like and pull them into your room. I have lots of graphic novels available for checkout in the Reading Lab. Come and see me if you have any questions whatsoever, and please fill out the form that's attached below for me. Thank you.